Hey, welcome back. This is the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael,
And I am James.
and tonight we are talking about this new Christmas puzzle, Joy to the World, which is the 2024 Christmas puzzle, which naturally, as you can imagine, aired on Christmas. So for us recording right now, just yesterday. And it was written by Steven Moffat, unlike the last Christmas puzzle, The Church on Ruby Road, which was Russell T Davies. And the plot generally is as follows. When the Doctor finds himself in the Time Hotel, which is a sort of hotel in which you can visit various time periods. I have to imagine it's for the wealthy, but it didn't technically specify that.
Maybe it was in a point of time when wealth didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, no, it's certainly possible. Like, it didn't touch it, so we don't really know. And it's during Christmas, and people are celebrating Christmas during our times, any location. He discovers this briefcase that seems to be attaching itself to both guests of the hotel and the staff of the hotel. So it's also like a sentient briefcase, controls them for reasons unknown. And once a young woman named Joy faces the same fate, the Doctor does as the Doctor does best, and he stays stranded on Earth for a year for no reason. Now, that's sort of me being a dick about it, but there is a portion of this episode when the Doctor's literally spending a whole year on Earth in I guess from December 2024 to December 2025. And from what we see, he's pretty much just hanging around the hotel the whole time.
Yeah, I think it's a funny juxtaposition because somebody pointed out online when the 10th Doctor needed money. I believe this should have been in the Christmas Invasion. No, the Runaway Bride. When he did in one of them, when he needed money, he just took it to an ATM machine, used a sonic screwdriver, and took money from it. When this Doctor needs money, he's like, "Hey, I guess I need a job, don't I?" Now, granted, it's probably just to pass the time more than anything. Although he's the Doctor, he has other things he could be doing, to be frank.
But we can attack that point later because I did find it somewhat annoying. This episode, though, has the following cast of Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, Nicola Coughlan as Joy, who is theoretically one of the main characters in the episode, though we'll talk about that. And far more interesting to me, Steph de Whalley playing Anita, which is sort of a woman with whom the Doctor has a friendship with during his year on Earth. We just see it really through snippets and such. But I thought that was more interesting, honestly, than most of what we got from Joy. So before we touch on the plot, and I sort of want to talk about the plot the same way we did with some of the last new episodes, I want to talk about both the positives and then go on to the negatives, because I think dividing it that way sort of makes sense. Before talking about that, though, I just want to talk about my personal expectations going into this one, because my personal expectations did not at all match what we got. That doesn't mean the episode's not good or the story is not worth seeing. It's just that it wasn't quite what I was hoping it would be. And it doesn't really reflect on the story. There's other issues with the story. My preconceptions don't particularly matter or play much a part in that. But I was honestly hoping, and I think a lot of people were hoping, that this might be a Christmas puzzle that somehow brought Susan back in. Because people have been talking about Susan coming back. I think ever since, well, I think people have been talking about it for a while, but I've heard it come up a lot since this last season started. So I was sort of hoping that they might find a way to pull Susan in for like a Christmas puzzle. It would be a nice emotional reunion. And instead we get a largely throwaway story that probably won't matter in the long run. In my view, it's somewhat disappointing. But to be fair, it's not like most Christmas puzzles are like particularly deep on the lore. When you think of things like A Christmas Carol, or I'm trying to, what the hell was that? Weirdo the Witch and something?
The Widow. Wait, what? Wait. I know this one.
The Doctor, the Weirdo, and the Tower.
Yeah, no, the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. That's
Yeah.
what it was.
I've only seen that one once, but I'm going to assume it wasn't deeply story lore related. It's just like a throwaway story, sort of nice to watch and sure, but then you move on. And it makes sense. They try to make these holidays passes a little more accessible to maybe the non-average Doctor Who viewer. So it makes sense that they might decided to not bring Susan back under those circumstances, but it's just something I was personally expecting. And maybe it was just false optimism on my part, but I was expecting it to happen, and it was somewhat disappointing to me. But like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean this isn't worth seeing. It's just my own thing.
Yeah, and it's also very important to note that we were out of the Doctor Who fandom, not out of it as in we weren't fans, we just weren't paying attention to any news, any trailers, any teasers for a good 5 months. So I am sure that it was probably disproven that Susan would appear months ago, perhaps, but my brother and I were not paying any attention to that. So I am much like my brother in that I would have preferred to see Susan, but in hindsight, this is being written by Steven Moffat. I doubt that Russell T Davies would want Susan to come back in a Moffat-written episode, not for reasons of hubris, but just he's the showrunner right now. He would probably want to do it in his own story, not hand it off to another writer.
Yeah, and we all know that Susan's just Mrs. Flat anyway, so it's okay.
Susan is not Mrs. Flat. That would be terrible. I don't know why Susan wants to tear down the gates of heaven or whatever she said.
We'll find out, bro. To all good things, there are reasons.
I guess.
So, yeah, like I said, the basic plot of this is somewhat structured in 2 parts. The Doctor is following this briefcase, which is, like we said, attaching itself to people. It's like one of those briefcases that has a pair of handcuffs on it. So we see it sort of jump from person to person, and we have no idea what its aim is or what its goal is. And the Doctor naturally finds this interesting as one word, and so follows it to Christmas of 2024, in which it attaches itself at first to a Solarian, who I have to admit, I didn't know was a Solarian. I just didn't remember that design, I guess. But then from the Solarian, it jumps to this young woman named Joy. Now, Joy is a woman whom we don't really know a ton about until the end of the episode, at least like the last 15 minutes. Because for quite a bit of the episode, at least that has Joy in it, she's sort of possessed by the suitcase or the entity in the suitcase. And because of that, it's not like she has a ton of character for a lot of her time on screen, which I think it's a somewhat common criticism. Like the idea that Joy is somewhat underutilized is something that I've seen a decent amount in reactions. And apparently on a side note, it's worth mentioning that Nicola Coughlan is an actress who was in, I think is in Bridgerton, which is a show that until we watched Rogue, I may not have heard of before in my life. So I've never seen Bridgerton. I have no idea how popular Coughlan is in it, but apparently she's like well known for that role. So something worth mentioning.
Yeah, and it would not be the first time a well-known actor or actress from another show gets misused in a Doctor Who episode. I don't have any examples, but I know it's happened, especially in some Christmas ones in the past.
Oh, I have some examples. How about Dan?
I mean, I guess he was a British comedian, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Or something
talk about the misuse of a character. But
that was over an entire arc.
Which makes it more damning.
I mean, that's true. I agree with Michael. I guess he didn't say it this time. We've said before, Dan from the Flock series might very well be the worst companion who has ever appeared in Doctor Who.
At least in the TV show. I'm sure there's some terrible companions in like audios and such, but yeah, that's just our personal opinion. Come at us, bro. But once Joy gets sort of possessed by this suitcase, we get a strange incident in which she's about to be killed unless a code is typed in to the suitcase. On the side note, Doctor's fault. Did it think it through? Great job, fam.
Well, to be fair, that led to some of the funniest lines in the episode for me.
Yeah. So what happens is that Gatwa's Doctor from the future comes through this hotel door because he comes from the time hotel from the future and tells the Doctor we've been following the code. Then he sort of takes Joy with him. This future Doctor takes Joy with him, and they go back to the time hotel, leaving the Doctor again we've been following in 2024 British hotel without a TARDIS. And he, like I said at the beginning, he's sort of stranded for a year because he can't get to his TARDIS. It's back at the time hotel. And this door is, I forget how they explained it.
Yeah, I think the future Doctor specifically broke the connection.
And the Doctor tells his younger self that he has to go the long way around before being all cheeky and leaving him stranded there for a year. So I was like seeing solidarity between selves.
To be fair, the Doctor rarely has solidarity between themselves.
Yeah, you at line.
I mean, even in this episode, the Doctor's just kind of the past Doctor's raving at the future Doctor and just saying all kinds of awful stuff.
Yeah.
Well, he's just frustrated, but still.
Yeah, and it's at that point that I think the following 10, 15 minutes, we're sort of following the Doctor as he is stranded on Earth for a year. Now, this is annoying to me, but it's not. I'm not going to jump on it right now. I will say when it comes to the positives, I do think this section is one of the better parts of the episode, mainly because Steph de Whalley, and apologies if I'm mispronouncing that name, she's playing a character named Anita, who seems to be running this sort of rundown hotel. It doesn't seem like a particularly high quality place, but I guess it shows the type of person that Joy is when she chose the room.
Jesus, I hated that.
Yeah. Steph de Whalley is, I think, really fun in this role. Now, I think there's some problems. She walks into Joy's room and sees like an alien in the Doctor, and she's like completely, what would you say, aloof? I mean, she didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, she's just kind of done with all of it, and she's just like, oh, okay, that's nice. Well, I have my job to do. I'm going to get on with it. I thought at first, I was like, oh, okay, perhaps the Time Hotel has operatives or connections in other places they have a room in to make sure things stay smooth, which that would actually make a lot of sense.
And if there were Time Hotel, they could do that too.
Yeah, exactly. It would make perfect sense. But as it goes on, no, she has no connection to the Time Hotel. She just walks into a room that she just rented a young woman. I mean, they're probably about the same age, honestly, as Anita might be a little older, but it's really hard to tell. She just walks into the room. I would say she's an alien, but to be fair, Solarians aren't aliens. They are, in fact, from Earth, for the record. I believe the 13th Doctor actually called them aliens and annoyed some people back in Nicola Coughlan's Night of Terror. But ignoring the fact that it was an alien, maybe it's just a mask, who knows? Either way, there were still two men in the room of a patron of her establishment, and she just doesn't do anything about it. She doesn't try to throw them out of the room. She doesn't try to say, hey, what are you guys doing in here? Go get your own room. She just continues on giving Joy her towels or something to that effect. Just a normal thing one would do in a hotel. And I really enjoy Anita as a whole. I thought she was probably the best actress in this episode. Not that there were too many. But the introduction to her in that context did annoy me a little bit. I know it's just for comedy reasons, but it still annoyed me.
Yeah, and it's one of the things where even if the people of Earth know they're aliens, and I'll be honest with you, I have no idea if the people of Earth doing that. It's sort of gone back and forth. I really don't know what the average person on Earth in this universe thinks about aliens. It's not clear to me.
The average person knows that a couple of years ago, like 6 years ago, Australia was under the dictatorship of Salamander. That's what they know.
Yeah, see, it's stuff like that that make it really hard to unravel some of this stuff.
You haven't seen Torchwood Season 4 yet.
You ain't lying. In fact, I've heard some people say it's not canon, but I don't know why. I've just heard some people say it's not canon, so that's curious to me.
Imagine Ages of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Go times. But when the Doctor is trapped on Earth, he sort of has, like I said, we see this through the small scenes. He feels isolated, though. He should feel isolated. I'll talk about that a bit later. But he feels isolated. He feels lonely. He misses Ruby. It should be referenced that Ruby isn't trapped with the Doctor at this point in time. So that's, I think, part of his issue. We don't know how long this story is after the end of Empire of Death, by the way. So for all we know, 1 trillion years have passed. So it's not clear.
There's actually 1 trillion and 2.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, it probably never will be clear. Therein lies the joy.
Therein lies the joy for Big Finish.
You're not lying. And in fact, I saw a lot of posts saying, Big Finish is going to have a hoot when they do this Year of the Doctor on Earth with Anita. And those actually might be enjoyable to listen to, so I look forward to them.
I am sure Steph de Whalley is already in Big Finish's index books.
I could easily see that going on. So what we get is, I don't want to say a cutesy scene of two people falling in love, because it's not really that way. Certainly, I think Anita's character is interested in the Doctor in a way that could be described almost as carnal. But it's more like just a nice friendship growing. It's nice to see, and it has I don't know, wholesome might be too strong, but it was nice to see that type of companionship growing, and it's partially those sequences in which I think Anita was a far more interesting character, largely speaking, than Joy turned out to be.
Yeah, those sequences like that could easily show up in a romantic comedy. You could easily expect to see things like that.
It's nice, and Anita pops back up at the end of the episode, though unfortunately doesn't, as far as we see, doesn't get to see the Doctor again. But hey, you never know. She would be a quality companion. Bring her back, bro.
I mean, there was the comedian they used in Eve of the Daleks. I do not remember her name. And it's kind of just a thing that they use these people for one-offs. I mean, they used that one singer in Voyage of the Damned. And I definitely don't remember her name. Kylie Minogue? Something like that. Either way, they use these people for these holiday episodes, and then they do never show up again.
Well, so it's a cynical part of me. They're only using these people to bring in more casual viewers, hoping that the big name will increase viewership for a holiday special. So that's a cynical side of me, and I think also the practical side. I don't particularly care for the practice. Like I said, I think Joy, being the actress she is, I'm sure she's a perfectly fine actress, but like I said, I just found her character so much less interesting than Steph de Whalley. And to be clear, I have no idea what else Steph de Whalley has even done. So maybe she's also a big actress over in the UK. I have no idea, but I just really enjoyed both her performance and those sequences. Now, once he reaches Hoye, he's able to get back to the time hotel via another door that he knows opens at that time. So he's able to get back to the time hotel. Then he's able to sort of burst back, and he's sort of like the quote unquote future Doctor we saw before, and then tell the code to now his previous self. And it's sort of amusing. It's mentioned about the only reason this Doctor knows the code is because the Doctor from the future told him the code. Like he never figured it out. It's like the whole who wrote Beethoven's Fifth that Peter Capaldi prattled on about.
Yeah, the bootstrap paradox. And that really, really annoyed me until the Doctor flat out said, oh yeah, no, I only know it because I heard it. And then he name drops the bootstrap paradox. I forget, he said something to Joy akin to, it makes no sense, roll with it. To be fair, Moffat did it right under the lake before the flood. I believe that was someone else. But Moffat did write the Bendigo opens the Big Bang, which also used the bootstrap paradox, if you remember that story, which actually I quite rather like. But it still uses a very obvious bootstrap paradox where there's no place the events actually start. And it's the same way that happens here. Joy says, you didn't learn the code, you just take an oath. There's no way you can know the code. And the Doctor says, but I heard myself say it, so that's how I know it. As though there's actually an explanation. I do appreciate them admitting in episode, yes, it's not an explanation, but roll with it. That's kind of cheeky, but what more could you expect from Moffat, to be frank?
Yeah, and then from that point on, we get what I would call a more generic adventure of Joy and the Doctor trying to figure. I mean, like I said, Joy's sort of possessed by this briefcase. The Doctor's trying to figure out what the briefcase wants. I guess he sort of figured out that he was thinking about that during his year on Earth. So he took that time to try to come up with ideas and such to plan for what he was going to do at that moment he saw himself in a year previous. So he finds out that this suitcase, and I don't have to go into all of it, but apparently the suitcase was manufactured by Villengard. And naturally, we last saw Villengard back last season in Boom, and from Muppet's very first story on televised Doctor Who, and the child the Doctor dances, there was a reference to Villengard. So I'm assuming they're going to play somewhat of a part in this upcoming season. Maybe there's going to be an episode with the Doctor, maybe. Well, he already sort of took them down back, was it during the Time War, technically?
Yeah, I believe there's a comic book that shows the Doctor destroying the Villengard factory as referenced in the Empty Child the Doctor Dances, of course, the first appearance of Jack Harkness. And that was actually portrayed in a comic story form as an event that occurred during the Time War by the War Doctor. I believe, I don't remember what the name of the story was. It was a only 5 4-page story. It was in a compilation of other Doctor Who stories. But if I'm not mistaken, the War Doctor teams up with Dorian Maudeville. I think he needed Dorian to get cords to the factory or something. And then he blows up and we see him start turning it into a banana grove as reference. So I think that's kind of funny. My point for the villain god thing was I would love for them to be a, maybe not main threat, but an ongoing issue. My only worry is, one, this is Steven Moffat's idea and probably would fit during a Russell T Davies season. 2, we get 8 episodes. Just how to fit things like this in when they have so many things to do with Mrs. Flood and the new companion we'll be getting, which it's interesting that they decided not to introduce her in this episode. So we get even less time with her than we get with Ruby. So think about that. Unless, of course, she stays on another season. And 3, I'll prefer it be written by Jamie Matheson, who is the one who wrote Oxygen.
Yeah, that's true. I still think they did a pretty good job in Boom, though. So even if they gave it to Moffat, I'm sure it could make something work.
We do not need another showrunner Tanya with Moffat as the lead.
Oh, no, I'm not saying give him showrunner, but I'm just saying he could probably bring together this whole villain god thing if he wanted to. But I don't know what form that would even take, since, again, we know that the War Doctor destroyed the factories, so it goes into a whole bunch of timey-wimey things that don't interest me on an emotional level.
Yeah, but the problem is they would inherently interest Moffat. That's how Moffat like to do.
Yeah, well, therein lies the critiques that we haven't gotten to with Moffat's time.
Speaking of critiques, remember how the Harmony Soul showed up in 2 episodes and never mentioned again?
Well, I barely remember they exist, so I'm going to say yes. But speaking of emotional resonance, I will say when it comes to the god, once we finally get some actual character out of Joy, I think it's decent. So, long story short, Joy lost her mother back in the days of COVID, and she has been naturally somewhat depressed ever since, her mother was in a hospital, and apparently due to COVID restrictions in the UK, God, it might just be Britain, maybe Scotland had different restrictions, I honestly have no idea. So I don't have to put my foot in my mouth. But due to some COVID restrictions, wherever Joy was at the time, she could not visit her dying mother in the hospital. She had to say goodbye. Well, she did technically say goodbye to her, just keeping up like a false face. But I had to speak to her via tablet things. I don't have one, on a side note. I have a flip phone, so I'm what you call technologically literate. So she had to say goodbye or speak to her mother as her mother was dying via tablet. And her mother died later. And, well, naturally, Joy found it somewhat heartbreaking. The worst part, it sounds like to Joy was, and she references specifically the events that are known as Partygate, which is something, I'll be honest, I didn't know about. I will admit to knowing very little about British politics. Well, since I'm not British, it's just not something I'm particularly well read on, aside from the fact that Jeremy Corbyn should be the next Prime Minister.
Well, yeah, I was about to say, the only thing we know mostly about British politics is that the Labour Party really sucks nowadays, since they've gone down the centrist, if you were to call it centrist, route, and that Jeremy Corbyn should indeed be the next Prime Minister. But that's probably not going to happen. But he did win his seat back, so that's something.
Yeah, and just to get into it, if you happen to be British and listening to this, you already know probably what Partygate is. It's apparently a really big issue. I had never heard of it, so I'm just going to go a little bit into it. But apparently, while there were a whole bunch of lockdowns and such during the COVID pandemic, there were pictures released of a party that the Prime Minister at the time, Boris Johnson, was attending. It's like a party where people were drinking and such. And I think both pictures and video were leaked from that party. So while people were having to say goodbye to the dying parents and family members via tablet, the Conservative assholes in office were just flaunting restrictions and getting together having parties. Apparently it's one of the reasons, again, did not know this because I don't follow politics in the UK. It's one of the reasons why Boris Johnson had such a downfall when he did, leading to his resignation. So I found that interesting, and I forget the exact verbatim thing that because Joy sort of has an emotional breakdown. I think it's a really strong scene. But talking about those people with doing the parties while people can't go see their parents, it was a nice emotional scene, and specifically calling out this Partygate thing, which I found somewhat interesting. And on a related note, I was actually looking into this, and I actually found an article, and I'll just read the headline. It's an article written by a Dr. Saliha Adenson. Again, apologies if I mispronounce that name, but just an article she wrote that, quote, while my father was dying from COVID in hospital, Nambutan, being Nambutan Downing Street, were flouting the rules at a Christmas party. And I saw another article about a woman writing about her mother dying, and then these videos and pictures being released. So I can imagine there's a lot of bad blood, a lot of unpopularity for very good reason, because the elites live by different rules than the people that the elites rule over. And yeah, that never leads to happy times.
And that's true in every country in the world, basically. Not just the UK.
When that portion of the episode comes up, I think it's probably Joy's strongest scene as a character. It's honestly, arguably one of the only scenes she really has a character.
No, it's about you say strongest. What other scenes does she have?
Well, she becomes a god later on, but I guess at that point she's not even Joy anymore. She's like Joy Seed.
I have no idea what she was.
Yeah, when it comes to the pros of the episode, the only other thing I really wanted to mention is a very small line by the Doctor. When the Doctor he's trying to ascertain where Joy is, and he mentions a bunch of parameters for this. Again, I'm trying not to get deep in the episode, but the suitcase sort of, the people that attach itself to it sort of takes in their personalities into itself, sort of. Well, it's sort of like what Villengard did in Boom, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's so scammy, I love it. The Doctor mentions mavity, and that came all the way back from Wablu Yanda. And it's such a quick line that's easy to overlook. And I'm just hoping, given another reference, I'm really hoping it leads to something in this upcoming season. I mean, I'm trying not to hope too much because Empire of Death killed my hope.
It killed the hope and it killed the podcast for 5 months.
Yeah, we can't entirely blame that, but it was not an optimistic way to go out. So I'm really hoping this mavity thing leads to something. It actually comes back in some form. But honestly, when it comes to what I consider the best parts of the episode, we have Anita's character, the reoccurrence of Villengard, portions of Joy's emotional backstory, and just a single reference to mavity. That's what I took from the episode as particularly enjoyable. I know there's some people out there who like other aspects, and certainly, like a lot of new Who episodes, you see people on both sides saying, oh, hey, this is really good, or this is quite an emotional story, and other people finding it more mediocre, which you pretty much see with a lot of episodes. You saw the same thing with 73 Yards, which to this day I despise.
Or you just want everything handed to you.
Yeah,
that's what the fans of the episode would say.
I'll say what I have to say to them later, bro.
Yeah, they'll also complain, oh, they never explained the creature in Midnight, when it's not that all the same. There's a difference between not explaining the creature and not explaining goddamn mechanisms of reality.
Yeah, not explaining anything. But that's not the point. It's entirely possible that we did not rage enough when we reviewed 73 Yards, but that's okay.
I think we were in shock.
We very well may have been. And talk about stories that are easily able to give shock to people. I can imagine that being one of them. But my point being, there's some people who really like more of the story than what I did, which is fine, because it seems to be a common theme for a lot of this previous season. But yeah, just from what I said, those are like the 4 aspects that stood out to me as good. And when it comes to things I didn't like, and we don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but one, the Doctor's planting a whole year on Earth. And from what we see, I mean, keep in mind, theoretically, David Tennant, the 14th Doctor, is out there now. I guess he's just spending his own time alone with Donna and her family. So maybe he would have wanted to interrupt him. But it just seems to me, there's so many friends he has on Earth. Like, he could have just gone to fucking UNIT and hung out with Mal for like a year or something.
He could have been an actual scientific advisor and replaced that, what was his name, Morris?
Yeah. No, I get him. Maybe he would be interested in working for UNIT again. He did that. He's done that before. But it's like this whole thing of, oh, he's lonely. It's all self-imposed. That's, I guess, partially the message. Like, there's a whole theme, oh, there's a chair. It's an empty chair, but the chair is potential. And then he invites Anita to sit down and there in Calm's lab or something. But I think it probably all links back to he's sad that Ruby's gone. Boo-hoo.
Like, one, Ruby had, I still say, no character. And the fact that she found out who her mother is means that she truly has no character, because that was all of the character that she had in the first place. 2, I thought that the entire idea of this Doctor was that he had the long time as the 14th Doctor to, quote-unquote, detox or rehab and get himself into a better place emotionally. And yet, the second one companion leaves him. I mean, he's not moping around the entire time. He seemed to be quite comfy at the beginning of the episode. But just underneath the comfort she has, he's still feeling really broken up about it. And I personally feel he's more broken up than he really should be.
Yeah, it was one of those scenes. He was grabbing some coffee. He grabbed 2 cups because he forgot Ruby wasn't traveling with him. We've seen things like that before. We saw the 13th Doctor thinking she's talking to companions, but she doesn't have any companions around her. So I'm sure we've seen Tanya talk to himself when he thinks he has companions. So it happens with every Doctor, but this Doctor just seems to take it more on an emotional level than I would personally expect. But I guess every Doctor is different. My main point being, he's spending a year on Earth. He has friends on Earth that he could go on, at least visit, check in on. And I guess there's nothing that says he didn't do that. And maybe they would have thought, oh, maybe that would be a bit corny or something, throwing a lot of like reconnections like that. But it just sort of annoyed me that it seems like all he was doing was hanging around this sort of rundown hotel. That's all he was doing for like most of a year.
I mean, see, the thing is, I don't think they should have actually shown him do any of that. Maybe have him mention it. Or maybe in his hotel room, maybe show some pictures pop up over the months. Maybe there's a picture of him in a cafe.
With Kate or something.
Yeah, with Kate. Maybe him in a cafe with Mal. Or with Tegan's around somewhere. These people are around. He misses them, obviously. He likes them. He wouldn't, I would assume, just ignore the fact that he can go visit them. Now, granted, this Doctor seems a lot more capable of this type of life than the 11th Doctor ever was. He couldn't wait an hour while Vincent was painting a portrait or a picture or whatnot. He could barely wait that time because he wasn't built that way. This Doctor is, at the very least, to give him credit, able to live a normal life on the whole. And I know that loneliness can in fact be self-imposed. I get that there is psychology behind that. It's not really a choice, but on the other hand, again, he did go through that year of rehab. Well, yeah, for however long the 14th Doctor exists, from my understanding of was it bi-generation?
Yeah, that's right.
From my understanding of the bi-generation, for as long as the 14th Doctor exists, the 15th Doctor has all those memories, and when the bi-generation happens, the 15th Doctor is born, quote-unquote born, with those memories. He should be rehabbed, hypothetically, again, in my understanding. And yet, again, in the first moment when the companion leaves, and he's in the perfect position to meet with probably the most former companions he ever called. Maybe he could go hit up Dan. I don't know why he would, but Dan's around. Technically speaking, I don't think the show ever said that Ian died. Maybe he should go visit Ian. Now, I know that obviously the actor has passed away, but maybe...
Yeah, I guess the main point is he had options.
He had a lot of options. He wasn't stuck on Mars.
And I think that's one of my, I would just say larger criticisms, but it's something that certainly stands out to me when it comes to this episode. And another one that I referenced, no point to really badger on about it, but I just feel like Joy didn't have much in the way of character. Her actress wasn't given a hell of a lot to do, which given the episode is called Joy to the World, you would hope a character named Joy would be a bit more involved. But it sort of ties into the finale, which I found largely hideous. I didn't find much of it particularly interesting. Now, there are concepts that they could play with in the future. I don't think they're going to. But it's like this, I don't know, overly sentimental sequence of a woman becoming a god, pretty much. And yeah, it just didn't do a ton for me.
Well, the funny thing is about the ending of the episode, where it reveals that Joy becomes this Tower of Bethlehem. And I'm saying this hesitantly because we've mentioned it before. My brother and I are both atheists. We've been atheists for over 10 years now. And I don't remember the story. Something like 3 wise men followed this tower ladder into Jesus as a baby. I believe that's the very basics of the story. And I promise you, I do not need religious scholars coming in and correcting anything I've said because I don't give a shit, to be quite frank about it. But so it made absolutely no emotional connection with me on that level in the slightest. Even at the end when the Doctor is smiling like, Joy to the world. I'm like, wait, why is that mad? And then I remembered, oh yeah, Joy to the world, the child is born, blah, 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 that song. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that song exists. And that was about my reaction to it. My reaction to basically this whole episode was, I found it kind of boring. There were some parts that were interesting, but on the whole, as much as I like the villain guard being brought back again, one, I don't trust that Moffat is going to continue this thread. I think he's kind of just doing it for fun because it's something he set up and it's an easy thing you can go back to. But 2, It's like what Michael was saying earlier. Christmas passes on the whole are just kind of these usually small, last series, more fun rums. And out of all the Christmas episodes that Moffat has done, I think, the Brothers Mahoney replied to somebody yesterday on our Twitter account and re-ranked this. We talked together for a bit, looked at all the Moffat Christmas episodes. He ranked this 8 out of 9. So I'm not saying it's a terrible episode. I think I might have liked it more than Michael, but I thought it was boring.
Yeah, and for those curious, the one we liked last in this and ranked 9 of 9 was Twice Upon a Time. So, yeah, just if anyone is curious.
And for the record, that's because I thought it was extremely disrespectful to the First Doctor. I liked the idea, but I thought they really flanderized, which is a TV trope, Tom, if I'm not mistaken. I think they really flanderized the First Doctor's character.
And I agree that this episode is, I think, past a certain point, largely boring, certainly unremarkable. Like seeing this T-Rex trying to eat the Doctor, I just don't give a fuck. Like, I'm not saying it was bad or anything. It's like, whatever. I thought that scene's like the Doctor's talking and then Joy can fucking see a dinosaur and the Doctor's not. It felt like the same type of comedy almost, where Ruby briefly turned into some lizard woman or something. I don't know. It's just not my type of thing.
What I wondered about that scene actually was how much money did they spend on the CGI for the dinosaur for what was basically a sight gag?
Yeah, that's not an unfair point.
Now, granted, there is a story reason for that to have happened, because the suitcase had to get to an area where the Doctor couldn't get to it for, I suppose, years later. But nonetheless, they could have done it in other ways.
Yeah, and just the whole finale, sort of the entity in the suitcase, which is supposed to become a power source that people use in a war. I'll give Villengard that's a pretty ambitious plan, but when it comes to trying to make profit of war, I guess you come up with whatever ideas you can do. And the entity sort of, I don't just say possesses Joy, but it sort of combines with Joy, and she pretty much becomes this tower, like what James mentioned earlier, this Tower of Bethlehem. I guess that's Joy.
Yeah, so I guess we have...
she time traveled in the past. I don't know. Not only do I not know, I'll be honest, I don't really care. Like, I'll be surprised. I don't want to say amazed, because you never know. I would be surprised if Joy came up again.
I'd be surprised if a single event of this episode ever came up again. In at least the main show. Again, Big Finish could play around with things.
Yeah, I just found the whole thing generally underwhelming, which it's fine. Like, I don't put a whole lot of faith on Christmas passes. Like, those are just largely standalone things that just get people in the Christmas mood. Certainly, Church and Ruby Road had its own issues, and plenty of the Christmas passes, like even some of the better ones, like Husbands of River Song, have a bunch of unnecessary comedy and light-hearted moments that I just don't care about. So it's something that doesn't bother me a whole lot. Like, I did care for this episode. I would never watch it again. I can't imagine watching it again anytime in the next 50 years. But it doesn't really bother me. Now, it will bother me if I have the same feelings about the opening of this upcoming season. That would bother me.
To be fair, the opening of last season was Space Babies. You cannot get worse than that.
Don't say that. Don't say that, please. You never know what they can do.
I mean, Davis did do Empire of Death, so I guess maybe I should say that. But even Empire of Death, if you're ranking just the single episode alone, I mean, certainly if you rank it with the first part, that has to be ranked higher than Space Babies. I mean, we did our official rankings. We did rank it higher, but that was not good. And Space Babies was really, really not good.
Yeah, so I'm still hopeful for this upcoming season. And like I said, I know there are other people who enjoyed this episode much more than I did, which is fine. It's whatever. It wasn't really my cup of tea, but there are certainly aspects I enjoyed, and I guess that's really all there is to it.
Yeah, my opinion on this is that it was boring. I have a friend who has started watching Doctor Who because they are interested to see how Ncuti Gatwa does the role. And they have no experience with Doctor Who in the past. And they actually started off with the These Passos, starring David Tennant as the 14th Doctor. And out of everything they've seen from those Passos and this one, they said, their words, not mine, they found it was the most boring. I kind of have to agree on the whole. I'm not saying it's the worst, but it did bore me. When you have a thing like Villengard, which is a fascist corporation, and yet that is frightful in itself, and I suppose you could call the suitcase an agent of the corporation, but with the way it mind washes people, with the way it kind of takes over their essences while it's attached to them. But besides the suitcase, there's no one out here trying to enforce the route they want it to go. So there's in some ways, no antagonist of the episode. And in most ways, people do storytelling, that means there's no real conflict. And that's the thing, for half this episode, it felt like there was no conflict because he was just wasting his time on Oath. Now, again, that wasn't his choice, but it was the choice of the writer, which is why parts of this episode, to me, kind of feel a bit disjointed in a way. He didn't even mention the parts at the beginning, the way the episode starts, where we see the Doctor going through 3 different time periods. I believe it was World War II, London being bombed, the admin Hillary at Mount Everest about to scale the mountain, and a lesbian woman on the Orient Express.
It's actually worth mentioning. I didn't know this at the time, and I haven't read into this. Apparently, that's a reference to the first James Bond movie, or potentially story, because there's 1962, same year Dr. No came out. Now, I have no experience with James Bond, but apparently the name of that character was the same as a character in the movie or something. So I can't give any more details than that, but apparently that's sort of what that train thing was going for.
Well, according to what I saw on TV Tropes, and I like reading TV Tropes after watching these episodes once it gets updated. And according to what I read on TV Tropes, and take it with a grain of salt, I haven't read the James Bond novels, I haven't seen the movies, but there is a sequence in one of the early novels that takes place on the Orient Express. So, yes, it's a nice, fun little cheeky reference, and that's fine for itself. But again, cheeky references don't make a good episode. And a good way to describe this episode for me, frankly, is boring's a good one, but also inoffensive. Okay, Chris is actually might be offended at the ending of the episode. And to be fair, I don't think for a second Moffat gives a shit whether he offends Christians. I don't think he cares. He did do the whole thoughts and prayers things in Boom, so I'm not convinced he cares. But also, I think it's interesting to note, and this is a very small point, Moffat's very first season as Series 5 of the revival was, at least to me, noticeably more friendly towards the idea of faith and religion, ironically, than the entirety of Russell Davis' previous 4 seasons combined. We'll talk about it when we get there. I swear that each episode mentions faith or religion, not a specific one, not a specific sect, but the idea in a positive way. And that, I think, might tie in with Moffat's one of his most used tropes, the power of love, which I'm not unconvinced is how this one also ended when the Star Seed, which is what was in the suitcase, bonded, I'll say, with Joy. I'm not unconvinced that Joy's essence or positive spirit is what caused the Star to not detonate there and caused it to go out into space to detonate there. It's not far removed from James Corden stopping himself from becoming a Cyberman because he loved his kid. At least I don't think it's that far removed. So yeah, I would say this episode is on the whole inoffensive and boring. I didn't hate it, and it might sound like I hate it. I didn't hate it. It was okay. It was something. It passed an hour. But I really can't say more than that. I didn't get emotional during the episode, which is interesting because there's actually something in this episode that is kind of related to us in a personal way, but it doesn't really matter because it didn't even evoke those emotions. At least to me, it didn't really do anything for me. Again, it was fine, but that's the most I can really say about it. It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all we have on this one. We don't know any episode titles or anything for this upcoming season, do we?
I can check right now, but as far as I know, the titles have not yet been released.
I think it starts, early next year, like March or something?
I believe that Russell Davis has said it's going to start sooner than we think. Now, if I'm not mistaken, so looking right now, yeah, the episode titles have not been released. And last season started in May. We got 2 episodes actually in one night, and what a night that was. And Space Babies in the Davis Code. I still like the Davis Code more than you, but yeah, Space Babies was just not it. But I believe Russell Davis has said the season will start sooner than we expect it to. So maybe it will be April, maybe late March. I don't think we know yet.
So yeah, I'm holding out hope it's a decent time. We'll find out when we get there. Yeah, but that's our thoughts on George of the Warlord. As always, you can let us know your thoughts either here on YouTube or on Twitter, where you could follow us, Twitter/X, where you could follow us at Brothers Mahoney. So if you have any strong feelings one way or the other on this one, just let us know. And again, thanks very much for listening. And we hope that all of you had a nice holiday. And we hope to see you again in the future. This has been Michael.
And I've been James.
And we will see you all later.